I think an add-on video for the Vlogger debate on consciousness. No real response videos on that subject, but I will use a video by Piro, or comments by Piro and Akantavad, and some more little bits that I wrote, and use that as a response, and just to focus the discussion, or force it if possible. It does need to be the nuance of what exactly is being argued or debated needs the context of some framework of agreement, and I don't think these guys are sticking enough to any kind of acceptance or recognition of the context of where we got our brains from. They evolved here on Earth. They're not they weren't manufactured in some special place in the universe. They were manufactured by evolution here on Earth in a carnage war. They're behavior devices primarily. They don't function to make you happy or to make you sad or to make you anything. They function to make you behave. And it's the behavior that gets rewarded in genetic survivability over time. And that's the origins of our brains. We're lucky in that through the process of evolution, it became advantageous for organisms to be able to understand the world they lived in, to navigate the world they lived in, to understand it accurately. So our brain used logic as a way of modeling, of duplicating the world, duplicating the logic in the world. And so we function rationally, reasonably. If properly fed premises, we can do the math and come up with correct answers to those from those premises. We can draw conclusions. We can extrapolate and predict, compose possibilities, and even values. So anyway, so Piro's video was basically just incomprehensible mush, so I'm not even going to bother playing it because it was just a waste of space. But anyway, I posted a comment. Nature designs incrementally by trial and error. That's pretty simple, right? Nature designs incrementally by trial and error. It means nature doesn't design, doesn't write on a chalkboard first and see if it's going to work. It just throws the mud at the wall, and whatever sticks, sticks. This approach is likely to produce inefficiencies as it provides little ability to migrate from standard form, which means once it sort of builds the operating system or builds the structure, it's sort of stuck with that. It's hard to do a redesign. You can't take it back to the drawing board and say, let's start over and let's fix that thing way, way deep down inside your reptilian brain. Because those kind of modifications are likely going to have a whole bunch of other stuff built on top of them, and they're going to be hard to extract from our DNA. That's why there usually ends up being some kind of vestigial something left over when animals do change. They end up with an appendix. Anyway, what works first, not what theoretically could work best, is what will be. So nature, evolution, doesn't look at the drawing board and go, let's work this out and see how this works out in the end. You know, when it says Tyrannosaurus, or it says great white shark, or it says whatever, assassin bug, it doesn't sit there and figure out any kind of dynamics, like if we do this different, or we change this, or we do that. It just happens, one little DNA molecule at a time. We feel because feelings can be value-weighted and in turn create attraction and repulsion. So the main force of movement or interaction is this attraction and repulsion, this go towards things that are beneficial and be capable of being repelled by things that are likely to harm you or hurt you or cause your DNA not to survive. And this is probably the fundamental necessity, is this attraction and repulsion. Get to the food and avoid the thing that's going to make you into food. Fundamental and feelings are what create this value weight, which means a feeling gets attached to a behavior or attached to a thing in the environment. It gets labeled, consumable, fuckable, or run the fuck away-able. Don't go near that bastard. Which in turn can create motive and or necessity for refined action. So in the theater that is our brain, our consciousness, these motivating feelings rise up in us with attached to them concepts of action, descriptions, thoughts of an action plan, and that plan can be yes or no by the feeling, the interaction in the brain as placed on it. So if a thought, as it migrates through your subconscious, it is tagged with value through that process based on whether it has logical coherence. And if it's found to have some lacking coherence, as it conflicts with something else that we know to be true, then this theory of, my brain could say, well, try flying away, and then it would know logically coherently, you can't fly, so this isn't going to work. So now we will downplay that as a strategy. There'll be a negative association tied to it, a kind of a little bit of a down feeling. Anyway, so that's the basic starting point. So that's why it makes an appendix. But why would it make, and how could it make, something that perceives, that is aware of perceptions, not only reactive to them, but having them as experiences? Well, how could it is not even a reasonable question to ask. I did. Okay? How could it? No, it already did it. So there's no could here. There's did. And this is the mechanism the biology fell onto. This is the mud that stuck to the wall. And the mud that stuck to the wall is something went ouch somewhere in our history. Trilobite, wherever it was, some little bug in the ocean swimming. It got a feeling, and the feeling was it had enough of a reacting sense to use that feeling as motivation to do something, to move, to get away. Probably ouch came first. It could have been desire that came first. But I think desire has to be made out of the negative state first. So I'm guessing it was something negative that was the first impulse. And the only way the impulse could have any meaning is that it had to come with a theater of some kind, a way of reacting to that feeling. So in a way you could say consciousness might just simply be, as me and the mysticist argued years ago, that the feedback mechanism itself might be what creates the feeling, might be what creates the capacity to feel aggravated or hostile. And it might be the very same kind of mechanism, very similar to the feedback in a microphone. So, when you hear that horrible squeal, or I could create the same thing in a video camera if I was using the camera in the computer, and you'd get that strobing effect of an image inside of an image inside of an image. And that might be fundamentally something that would be hostile to the biology. And once it has something that is value weighted, it evolves to use that value weight as a mechanism to tag things in the environment. And once they're tagged, once they're labeled by a brain, now the brain can migrate that label through thought processes and come up with strategies to interact with that labeled thing in its brain and prevent interaction with that labeled thing. So now it can see confrontations before they take place and avoid them, which is the nature of learning, and it has obvious advantages. And I shouldn't have to explain the advantages of being able to avoid negative circumstances likely to harm your physical being. Yeah. As with a computer, they should just go in and have effects. Yeah, well, computers aren't... It's the static nature, right? I mean, obviously we migrate through a life, and so there's this this capacity to be able to learn as you migrate through the life is really valuable. And learning is going to require this value weighting. And like I said, maybe there is a way of making a prime directive and doing it all without any consciousness at all. But it's certainly obvious how there's a huge benefit, or it does functionally work, to be able to create this conscious theater and create something that can be harmed, and then it tries to protect itself from the harm. It seems a clear and obvious motivator. How exactly you could do that synthetically isn't so easy to explain, because it's almost like you're using the brain for both processes. You're first using the brain to create the illusion of the problem, the feeling. So you're converting a problem in the world into a problem inside your sentient being, inside the model you've made of the reality. And inside the model, the problem now just has you've converted Tyrannosaurus, the image of Tyrannosaurus, to ouch inside your brain. Now your brain just acts as if ouch maker. That's what a Tyrannosaurus is now. It's an ouch maker. And so now it can migrate ouch maker through the thought process, and so now it doesn't know Tyrannosaurus as just big lizard, blah blah, the details. Now it knows it as something dangerous. And it's through experience it learns that other little things might bite it also, and they might be put in the category of ouch maker. And so we would learn to recognize what makes ouch, and we might even recognize that, oh, things with big teeth are dangerous. So we'll take, you know, these different instances of what qualifies, what aspect of these things that cause harm is common, and then we can start recognizing what the real danger is. Yeah. It's very difficult to explain consciousness, but I think it is basically an illusion. It's just one hell of an illusion. But the fact that it's the brain playing with the brain is the point I think you got to understand. The feelings are being created by the brain as a reflexive reaction, and then the brain is reflexively, we call it intelligence, but it's reflexively reacting to the feeling. Anyway. How can part of the universe feel? And given an answer to that, how can it feel differently in different locations? Well, I think it's quite obvious that it can feel different in different locations. We can turn our consciousness on and off with just stick a steel rod in there. You can be perfectly alive and your brain will be alive, but it won't be conscious anymore. Consciousness is an arrangement. When the arrangement breaks down, consciousness breaks down. So yeah, it's the product of the mechanism. I think the mechanism is very old and crude. I think the nature, the source of our consciousness is deep inside our brain. Looking around this house, critters in here. Anyway, I don't think the critters that aren't supposed to be in here. Anyway, Alright, so it's kind of odd. Motive. Okay, so I think he was responding to me, but he says it's a response to Piero, but I think it's quite obvious. Motive is in my comment. Motive is mentioned, and there we are back to the will, whether we like it or not. Now, I think obviously the subject of consciousness and will are pretty well tied together. Motive is desire. Desire is will. Yeah, and also motive is fear. Motive is, lots of emotions. So, but yeah, desire is a strong one. Addiction, I might even say. This is a subject that is not to be entered into lightly. Well, I don't even know what that means. Because What? Who's been light about it? Hundreds of videos trying to detail what the function is. So I don't think I've ever could be accused of taking it lightly. I've made a very heavy amount of videos on the subject of brain function, because there will be many frustrating conversations along the way. Well, they don't have to be as frustrating as they are if people would quit being personal in their pointing of their argument. And the most frustrating part of it all is that the people who frustrate you the most are often the ones who are actually trying the hardest to engage you in a productive discussion. Well, again, I'm not that hard to engage in productive discussion. You just have to avoid being grotesquely insulting to my intelligence and my ideology. If you're going to insult me or insult it as you're discussing, well, yeah, that's probably not going to get you too far. So anyway, my additions to this subject are somewhere here. There we go. Alright, so I'll add some more text. There is some text in, so this might be a little better. So just start to finish. So let's start with some premises. And if there's something in this that you disagree with, then argue a specific piece of this. And acknowledge what you accept, if you accept the basic, crude nature of our biological evolution, which this sort of states. Okay, so the universe is crude forces and energetic interaction. So you've got crude basic forces and you've got energy in the universe set in motion. I think we should be able to agree. The universe contains little real complexity outside the chemistry produced by DNA replication. So outside of what the DNA molecule produces as a byproduct, all the chemistry it makes to make our organs and our senses and our brain and all this crap, there isn't too much complex chemistry in the universe. There's nothing close to a brain out there made out of something else. There's nothing close to, the biology really, the chemistry really is pretty crude. What's the most complex ball of chemistry, pound of chemistry in the universe outside of the chemistry of a biological organism or its decomposing body? There really isn't anything that's at all very interesting. And most of it would be chemistry that takes place in very hot environments. Anyway, DNA replication creates a filtering competition that makes survival valuable acquisition of well-orchestrated behavior. That makes yeah, I know there's a way of reading this that it doesn't sound stupid. DNA replication creates a filtering competition that makes valuable, let's just take survival out for now, that makes valuable acquisition of well-orchestrated behavior. So obviously there's incentives built into this gladiator war to acquire tools. And a really good tool is the ability to orchestrate your behavior, to be skillful, to be able to, kung fu or something. That's really good stuff to have. If you can have some sort of intelligence, some sort of knowledge, some sort of reflexes that allows you to do something very fancy to dispose of your adversary or your dinner, whichever one you happen to be dealing with. Our sense organs and intellectual capacity has a well-understood lineage. So I'm just saying here that we do know where we came from. We understand our psychology. We understand the mechanisms of our socialization, why we have an ego, why we do the alpha thing. These are all structures that exist in nature and all these other mammals. We can really dissect much of what we are, and why we do what we do, and why we think the way we think, and why we feel the way we feel. It's all pretty dissectable. Yeah, that's the word. And we can see how it developed through history pretty like, now we don't see every lizard and every bug and every single thing that was part of our history, but we certainly have enough of it to get the idea. Attraction and repulsion are the fundamental devices of orchestrated refined. So orchestrated and refined are kind of the same word, right? Movement, interaction. Movement and interaction are kind of the same word here. But that's the game. I mean, the game is basically you are attracted to the food, to the sex, and you are repulsed by the things that are going to make you incapable of eating your meal because you're something else's meal, or the things that are going to get in the way of you getting your piece of the sex, that kind of thing. The sentient brain uses feelings to qualify experiences and in turn learn. So basically here's, I'm trying to find a way to state this idea that you really can't learn without something to value one thing over another. It has to be able to judge, like logic itself couldn't work, because there has to be a way to define the right answer from the wrong answer. And feelings are a very effective way of doing that. So when you do 2 plus 2 and you have 3 on the other side of the equal sign, there has to be something in the brain that says why 3 is wrong and 4 is right. There has to be something to tag the 4 as correct answer and the 3 as wrong answer in the learning brain. And the thing that does that is this idea of a sensation tied to it. Feeling of correctness. Feelings are fundamentally a motivational device needed to provoke the effort investment of thought and work. So feelings do create, I mean, if an intelligence was just sitting there, it needs prime directives. It needs a reason to think. It needs a reason to do something, to process. And so that has to be built in somehow. But we weren't built that way. We were built incrementally. So first what had to be built was the motivation to do the action, because it couldn't just write a prime directive. I mean, a sloppy, ambiguous prime directive of you survive doesn't tell an organism much. It needed to have reflexes that made that possible first. And it needed to have very crude mechanisms through its development, because it didn't go to high school. It wasn't automatically educated. So it had to have crude devices that made it work in some sort of minimalistic way, and also gave it the potential to work in a very sophisticated way. And so unlike other organisms, mammals, most of them, I think all of them, can do a substantial amount of learning in their life and nuance themselves to their particular environment, to their particular niche within a niche. So they're not only a niche organism, but they're also a niche within their social group, and they're also, they can be layered in nuance of particular behavior that only works for their particular circumstance. So if they're hunters, they got to work one way. If they're gatherers, they got to work another way. But having the diversity to do either one by learned acquisition of those skills is really, really valuable. All right. Brains are reflexive networks that can produce feedback stimulation of a reflex or a reflexive network. So the brain can, now they're not too artfully stated, but basically it's all reflexes. It's all knee jerks. And the funny thing of the network can have a very sophisticated reflexive reaction. I can hold up a word, just a word, finger, and my brain has all kinds of reactions to that word. And the bottom line is all those reactions can just end up being re-stimulation of the network. So it just thinks more of words about fingers, and then those words trigger new words, and those words trigger new words. And all the reflexing is just happening inside my subconscious, and it produces no action. It just produces a continuous refinement based on the stimulation of that word. And so it just goes into the gear work and just fed right back into the very reflexes that so it's basically knee-jerking to its own knee-jerk. And it's that feedback mechanism that's, I think, fundamental to what we sense as consciousness. I think the feedback is actually the thing that's creating the static or the aggravation, the tension that is in reality what consciousness is. Consciousness isn't fundamentally a good thing. It's fundamentally tension, and it's being relieved of the tension that is the good. Yeah, pretty much. Consciousness is sort of just like a really loud noise in a way, and it's when you make it softer that you feel better. Consciousness is an illusion, but it's one hell of an illusion. So I'm stealing the Einstein line about time. But I think it can't be argued that it's not. It has no substance. It's a byproduct of arrangement. There's a kernel or a minimum amount of chemical electrical arrangement that is the core of our consciousness, that does create the sensation, the ouch. And there's this whole big pile of reflexes dumped on top of that, so it's going to be really hard to ever filter it down to that minimum essence. But the bottom line is, I think it is just, it's just something happening inside a brain, obviously. And it is an illusion, but it's the most important effect, byproduct, the universe can create. But it only has substance in this very limited sense. It has no material substance. It only has byproduct function. It only has a byproduct. It only has there's only meaning to it in its arrangement. It's like a triangle could just be made out of a substance. It's just a piece of a substance. This is a square. The squareness doesn't in itself mean anything. It doesn't do anything. But in consciousness, it's the idea of the squareness actually creates something. It actually, the illusion is, it's illusion plus. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that can be said. I mean, it's the only thing I can state that has any meaning is the sense that it does create this, this illusion of a self and the qualitative sensation. Yet it's only taking place inside of a neural network. So it doesn't have a material form specifically, but it's obviously, because of the arrangement, creating something as just squareness. And it's like consciousness is like squareness, except squareness means something. Yeah, I can't. I have to work on that one. A more articulate way of saying that. Alright, so that's more than enough of a video. Sorry, a little bit long, but it's that's what it took today. I would like to refine the conversation to these points, though, find the elements of disagreement and work on those. But again, I just don't see any point in having these conversations about consciousness where I don't ever hear any of you people ever talk about the context of where we got our brains. Our brains are a product of evolution. They didn't just spontaneously appear. We know where they came from. We know primarily why they function the way they do. Just about every aspect of our psychology can be dissected to some crude evolutionary function. Alright, till next time.